Okie dokie. We are live, friends. As you can see, we're going to talk about estimation. I'm going to wait for a few folks to trickle in, but this is mostly in response to so much unnecessary story point hate that I see out there that I feel obligated to defend the honor of the story point. So, like a knight in the medieval times, I charge into battle with the Fibonacci sequence on my shield, ready to defend the story point honor or the honor of story points. I do a fair amount of replying to situations or discussions on LinkedIn about story points and the story point hate. I have a good friend slash story point enemy, Ryan Ripley, that leads the charge against the honor of story points, who I must defend against. So this is in response to you. I do expect that Ryan and I will share a podcast or something like that where we debate the pros and cons of each side, because like everything, there is no perfect answer. There is no silver bullet, but this is going to be an opportunity for me to reinforce the value of story points. And there's a couple other things that I do with estimation that I think makes a difference. Not that I think, but I know makes a difference. So that's what today's AMA is all about. Hello, Steve. It says Steven. Is it Steven or Steve? Is there a preferred name that should be used? That's all I need to know. Priority number one. That's it. Okay, so as you can see in the chat along the way, feel free to jump in. Feel free to post your questions and we will respond. And usually what happens is your fellow viewers jump in and respond with as good or better content than I do. That's the whole value of this thing. I'm going to move that logo since it sits right on top. I don't know if I can move it. Well, I won't worry about that right now. Okay. So I understand a lot of the frustration that teams and people out there in the world feel with story points. My argument is that the problem is not story points. The problem is the misuse of story points. And as an agile leader, I don't allow myself to say, okay, story points are being misused, so we're going to trash the story points. That's the problem. We're just going to get rid of that. There's an argument that that's a way to go, because as I'm raising a puppy, that's one of the most effective things I can do is remove the temptation for her to chew on my shoes, which she loves to do. So you can go the puppy approach and remove the temptation for misuse. That's an answer. I don't believe it's the answer. The answer is to correct the behavior for the long term and not avoid correcting that behavior. Correcting the behavior sounds easy, sounds simple. It 100% is not. And I understand a person's choice of not doing that. But I don't believe you're being a good agile leader if you do that, because you're not creating the agile mindset that your team or teams need to succeed within the organization. As an agile coach, it's your responsibility to transform the entire organization into an agile organization. Help them understand that the existing habits they have need to be replaced with new ones. Notice I was very careful to not say bad habits, because the habits likely aren't bad. The habits are probably pretty good, but there are better habits that are out there. So your role as an agile leader is to help that organization shed old habits of misusing story points and build new habits in understanding how they should be used effectively. One of the other challenges that I see is story points are the only units of measure that are used for estimation. That creates a problem. That's the only tool that you provide the organization to measure things, to see and understand things. When I build and lead an organization, we get to estimation, story points are left alone for stories. Story points are not used in any larger unit of measure. So when I look at epics or features or whatever you want to use, I use another measurement that is much more coarse. What I use is a simple t shirt sizing or soda sizing or whatever you want to do of small, medium, and large. And those for me historically are grouped into quarters. So a team can do four smalls in one quarter, two mediums in one quarter, or one large in one quarter. And that's the information that I share with the organization. Because at that point, you're talking about the value that you're delivering to that customer base, user base, whatever it might be, as opposed to the individual stories that make up those pieces. Now, yes, you might share those during a demo, but you need to continue to drive it back to that larger business value that you're creating with those groups of stories. So do not allow story points to be the only mechanism that's used across the organization to talk about how we measure and estimate things. So Jamie, that is exactly one of my topics, and good to see you from across the ocean. I know you moved correctly or correct. I hope things are well, that your move went smoothly, family's happy, and all those things. So, yes, it is 100%. And I have lived through that situation. One of the best teams that I ever built was exactly that. They were just phenomenal. And we would point stories, and we actually stopped measuring our story output. Goodness gracious, Jamie. The nomad life. Uh, as we measured if a sprint was full and whether we were done planning, we stopped using story points and we just started using the items that were loaded into that story because the team just was in a really good groove. Unbeknownst to them, I started to really wrestle with this, and so did they. And apparently at lunches, they had talked about story points. Man, maybe we should just abandon those. But they were like, no, Josh would never go for it. There's no way, we should just forget it because we know Josh loves the value of those, and it's just like it's not even worth the fight. So I'm like, oh boy, what kind of ogre am I? But during actually at the start of a refinement session, I asked the question and I said, I'm not sure story points add value for us anymore. So if you guys want to stop using them, I think we're at a point at a team where that's a reasonable choice to make. So number one, they all fell out of their chairs. After they picked themselves up and got back in their chairs, dusted themselves off, we launched into a discussion about the pros and cons of it. After a half hour or so, the team chose to keep the story points. They kept the story points because they were a tremendously valuable mechanism for getting to a clear understanding of that story. They felt that if they weren't forced to put a number on something and share it with their peers, that they might not have the discoveries that happen in refinement as a team seeks to understand what that story is and what's needed from it. So even the best teams that I've ever had, I felt they could have done without it, but they understood that the value of the story point is not the external visual of this is how long something is going to take, but the internal use of this is how we really refine stories effectively so that they end up in a spot where any member of our team can confidently grab that unit of work and go make it happen. There weren't going to be 1,000 questions. It was clear and we were ready to roll. So, yes, you can get there, Jamie, but I would advise against it because I think the team will still aspire to get those questions answered, but the rigor of the story points helps ensure that there is no um, lessening of the importance of that ceremony of getting things to a truly refined state. And I believe that is a common symptom across the board that teams struggle with unrefined stories that they believe to be refined because they're trying to get through refinement as quickly as they can, or they just don't know what a great story and what a well refined story looks like. So there's a lot of effort that goes into making that happen. Amen, Stephen. That is 100%. We're going to highlight that because it's cool. So yes, this is the primary reason that I don't believe you should abandon story points. Use something else. I don't care. Sure. Size it some other way. Use some other mechanism. Use some other measure. I don't care. But use something that forces your team to get into that nitty gritty discussion of how the heck are we going to build this? What's it going to look like? What are the things that we need? Now, I'm also the guy that says don't argue between a 3 and a 2. Just take the bigger one because the time you'll spend getting down to that perfect sizing is likely the difference between a 3 and a 2. So there is this balancing act that you have to walk where you get to good enough sizing because otherwise you can over refine and that's like even worse because you spend so much time getting down to effectively defining the steps along the way. And requiring a whole team to do that is not necessary when you have good engineers or good team members that know how to build things. So you have to be careful about over refining. Otherwise, you end up spending a lot of time and refinement becomes that thing that people hate because it takes forever. They don't see the value. It's misunderstood, all kinds of challenges. All right, I'm going to ask some questions here. Too effing big? Uh, NFC. The last one is one story point. Um, NFC. Hmm. Not for consideration. What else could that be? Jamie, you got to help me out with that one. Oh, so okay. I should have known that one. Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So Steven's hitting a common misuse around story points and why so many people get so fired up about it. And I understand the problem of velocity being the metric because in many organizations that's the metric that matters. It is scrutinized to the nth degree and builds bad habits across the board. So don't allow that to happen. Another issue that I see, and I just don't understand it. I think it's strictly a human condition where we as humans feel a need to jam that sprint full and overstuff it and have more story points than we've ever completed in that planned sprint. That's a huge problem. You just set yourself up to fail. What I do and what I coach, and it takes a ton of effort to get there, is explain to teams that there's nothing wrong with sizing and loading up a sprint with what you actually believe can be done. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with pulling in new stories to a sprint. There's nothing wrong with finishing everything that you planned and grabbing the next thing off of the backlog as you really begin to narrow down into what your average velocity really is. But so often we go the opposite and we overplan, we overstuff sprints. And that creates this feeling of repeating failure, but it's self inflicted repeating failure. So please coach your teams to not do that. Please don't let them overplan, overpack stories, because every week you look at that velocity chart and it's no fun to look at. It's not. You just feel like you're letting yourself down, you're letting your team down, and then it also becomes a thing that gets quickly misused up the ladder as people somehow get a hold of that and start asking ridiculous questions. Exactly what Steven mentioned is here. If can't why is the team failing? What's going on here? Why can't they ever complete a sprint? So do the right thing. Underplan sprints. Actually, don't underplan them. Plan them for what the team has 100% confidence in getting completed. And then pull the next one, two, three, four, five, whatever it is, stories into the backlog as the team sees fit. The other piece of that, where I see a lot of misuse, is a team gets scared about, oh my gosh, we have like 2 days left. And the next item at the top of the backlog is an 8 point story. We're never going to get that done. So what? At that point, you have to have the discussion of what's more important to that team. Is it minutely packing magically perfectly sized stories into the sprint so that there's no overlap? Or is it more important to work on the next most important thing for us to work on? When you step back and view it like that, that's what really matters. But that's an effect of misuse of story points and being worried that, oh no, we're going to make our sprint look bad because we're going to pull in this story and we're not going to finish it. But that's not how whoever's presenting in a sprint demo should present it. It should say, hey, the team knocked all of our stuff out. And the next thing that was at the top of our list was a pretty beefy thing. But we decided to pull it in and get started and get a jump start on next sprint. That's how you define it. That's how you talk through. Number one, that's reality. Number two, it sets the right view on the value that's being delivered as opposed to the story points. When you start talking in those tools, in those methods, then you start to reframe the organization on how we're thinking about things. We are thinking about the value that we're shipping to our customers as opposed to the value of the numbers that we made up to measure these things. I got to catch up. Okay, so Stephen, Stephen and Jamie have great points as they always do. So if there's any newbies that are out here, these are the kind of folks that are in this AMA every week. So, yes, you get the talking head of me up here spouting things off, but the chat is where a ton of value is. So, don't lose that value. Get in here, jump in with questions, and again, you'll get a ton of help for free by real pros that do this every day, and they're really freaking good. So, don't miss this opportunity. Jamie, you make a great point about definition of done is being very strict with that and not allowing people to sidestep it. So that's something that you as an agile leader have to make sure is defined well, and it can evolve over time. So don't just define it once and then leave it. You might have to add or remove, or who knows what's going to happen over the years or months or whatever it might be that you're using those. So don't be afraid to revisit those at times. Equally important to me is a definition of ready. So that definition of ready for me is less about the team and more about all the pre-work that has to happen to get a story ready to be refined. There's a ton of times where stories get thrown in front of teams to be refined when they're not even close to ready. It's a one-liner, or there's just no clarity, or it's a UI story and there's no design or wireframes or anything like that. So what I like to do is I actually like to have a whole separate board that's used by the product owners that models out all of the work that has to happen from concept to actually getting that story ready to refine. And then it's connected to the teams board in that in the to-do column for the team, only items that are ready for refinement show up in that list. So that way, their to do list isn't 50,000 miles long. It is the refined items. Sorry. It is the items that are ready to be refined and are ready to go for the team to start paying attention to. They can look at those, start to understand them, see what's coming up as a part of refinement, and be ready to go when the refinement happens. So make sure you have clarity and agreement on what that definition of ready is so that you cannot allow time to be wasted by the entire team in trying to get a story to ready to be refined. That's the product owner's job. That's a huge piece of what they need to do so that we minimize waste of working through that with the entire team. Okay. Let's see here. Let me get everything back to where it was. You don't have to stop the front end conversation. That's a that's another those bite-sized chunks. That's a something. That's something that requires time and repetition for the team to understand what the appropriate size is, and that size is a tricky word, but how beefy or how thinly sliced should your stories be? And it's different for every team. It's going to be different for every team in your organization if you have multiple. It often depends on the makeup of your team and how that work is going to be sliced and diced. Do you have a bunch of generalists that can jump in and do it all and are more comfortable looking at more broad stories? Or Do you have a siloed set of skills? Now, maybe that's not what you want to have, but that might be what you have. So don't force your teams into a behavior that they're incapable of yet. That doesn't mean they won't get there, but just make sure that you work through that with them where they are, but don't allow them to stay where they are. Keep coaching and working them through towards becoming that more generalized black box. That's what I look for. That's what great teams are to me, is that they are a black box that I can shove a complex problem into, and an amazing solution, elegant solution is going to come in the other side. You monsters. Thanks for the follow. Welcome aboard. Okay, so sizing issues. Let's see where to go from there. A common issue is roadmaps. Roadmaps in so many places still live in the waterfall world. They unfortunately are created around budget time and are almost locked into place for the entire year in that one sitting. So at that point, you're trying to do agile in a waterfall framework. So that's a problem. Your product team should be refining your roadmap at least once a month, sharing roadmap updates, both upstream and downstream. Because otherwise, what? Look at that. Private dating chat girls. YouTube should take care of that, I would imagine. We'll see. So back to the, sorry, I was distracted by the spam chats that we were getting. So I maintain a rolling backlog, excuse me, a rolling roadmap of the next 12 to 18 months broken down into quarters. So I don't do it month by month. I do it by quarters of the next 4 to 6 quarters. And I require the product team to update that once a month based on everything that they've learned. There should be minimal movement in the nearest quarter, say the current quarter or in the next 2 quarters, because as you refine it, a bulk of the change is going to happen towards the back of the backlog where things are new and they're getting understood. And maybe we don't have a real solid sizing on yet because we might not do those things. So they will be, as I like to say, more foggy the further out that you go. So allow those items that are 12 to 18 months out, allow them to be foggy, but know they're there. And every month, as you do a refinement of that roadmap, try to clear some of that fog as those items get closer. As you move forward in time, those items that were 6 quarters out are now 5 quarters out or 4 quarters out. So it's more important that you start to refine those and start to get to clarity on what is a realistic sizing. Oftentimes that's based on what is this thing exactly? Because I am sure many of you have roadmaps that have like 3, 4, 5-word descriptions of what they are. We need the team to build this thing on the database for a customer. And that's it. A number one product organization, don't allow that. The items that you track in this roadmap should be tied to an outcome, not an output. Not that we did a thing or we built a thing, but this is the value that we delivered for our customers. We now unlocked a capability for them that will increase their capacity by 25% or something like that. Ensure that they all are measurable. Otherwise, how do you know if you're building the right things? You just build things and shove it out there and don't track and measure. Was it the right choice? Wasn't it the right choice? Did we launch it poorly? Did we not do a good enough job with communicating to our customers or inside of support as we launch this and it starts to get implemented across the thousands of customers that you may have? It might not be that you built it poorly. It might be that you delivered it poorly. So at that point, that's a relatively easy fix. You don't have to build anything new. You just change the way you talk about it. You change the way you announce it to your customers. That's a huge win to be able to know that, as opposed to just shipping a thing and then scratching your head saying like, "Hey, are people using this? I don't know. Did we build the right thing? I don't know. Should we continue to spend money on this team that builds things? I don't know." So that's the ultimate trap that you build for yourself when you take that approach. You don't grab the reins and show the world, this is the value that we're delivering. This is why you need to invest more within our organization. Number one, we build great things. Number two, we build things that our customers love. Should probably be opposite. Number one should be that we build things that customers love. Number two should be the things that we build them really well. So that's why you want to continue to invest with us. In fact, invest more because we have the capability to show you what we can do. Now, notice that showing you what we can do, none of it was story points. It had nothing to do with that. It was around the value that was delivered. Everybody say hello to the daughter. And now the puppy's fired up. That's okay. And it must be, oh, it's Aiden. I thought maybe it was Anthony. Dog goes crazy when Anthony gets here. Let's see. Where was I? Oh, yes. When you frame everything in value as opposed to story points, you again begin training all of those folks along the way. And this is what we talk about. This is what we do. We deliver value. We don't deliver story points. Story points are just a tool that we use along the way to make sure that we're building the things right. And by building right, it means that we actually know what we're doing before we start. There's still a lot of agile teams that start building stuff that they don't really know how it's going to happen. They don't have that key discussion, and it just turns into a death spiral. Yeah, yes. River was quite opinionated in the last episode. So trying to figure out how to fix that problem. Now, the issue that we're going to have on the stream is the daughter went upstairs. The cat went upstairs. And when the dog knows the cat is upstairs, the dog wants to be upstairs. But we have a very effective block on the stairs that's a large suitcase that allows the cat to get down on the sides, but the dog can't fit. So she's starting to whine because she wants to go play with the cat. And I assure you, the cat does not want to play with her. The cat's old. Puppy's 6 months old. So their desire to play are drastically different ends of the spectrum. Okay, so that means I probably need to cut this short. So we'll be done. But let's see. Jamie, Steven, thanks for being awesome as you always are. Thanks for jumping in with thoughts, opinions, questions. Because yeah, you hear the dog. Thank you to our new follower, Monsters. And thank you to my dog for being annoying. So, all right, everybody, take care. I will see you next week and expect more fired up content about story points from me and Ryan Ripley. We're going to have a battle royale and I'm going to win. All right. See ya.